that's why the conversation becomes complex, right? You try to, as a person coming into your own awareness and consciousness as a Black person, getting akin to your own story, you try to villainize colonization, but there's a lot that we still don't understand about development that makes us unable to also recognize the benefits that we enjoy today. And I feel like people who carried out the colonial project feel like we're devolved in that sense. So it's like there is no black and white, although we'd like to all reduce it to black and white thinking. The truth is, before the discovery of penicillin and antibiotics, tuberculosis was killing 1 billion people a year around the world. And we're live. Welcome to another session of Abby's Book Club. This is the Impressions podcast, where we read a book and share our first impressions of it. I'd actually love one day, Fifi, to have in-depth sessions where we revisit the books that we've read, certainly the best ones, and give better analysis, because some of these books are too difficult just to leave it at a first impression, right?
No, agreed. It's like, especially this. Like, I wanted to read it again. I was like, can I read this in 6 hours? I'm sure I can, right?
Oh, man. I mean, on that note, let's show everybody what we're reading. We have a tradition at this book club where we hold up the book of the month to the screen to show that we are indeed supportive community members of the literature space, right? And yeah, so as you can see, I got it too. I'm ready today.
See, Abby's Book Club, guys.
I'm ready today.
It's the movement.
So as you've seen, we are reading Chimamanda Ngozi's Purple Hibiscus. Deep sigh in the beginning. Deep sigh. I don't know why we keep doing this to ourselves, right? I don't get it. I don't get why we keep doing this. We pick the most intricate, complex, history-rich books to review as first impressions on this podcast, and I'm always stunned at the beginning. I'm sure you have a lot to say.
Yeah. Yes, actually, like, this is one book I can say, oh my goodness, just the levels on it. Even you can see how she was influenced by even Chinua Achebe, and in her own interview, she's mentioned, but you can see the influence in this writing. I was like, okay, I'm sold.
Jeez.
Like, I was in.
Well, I haven't even heard the interview where she says that she was influenced by Chinua, but immediately that's what I thought too. In fact, when we were about to come into this podcast, I was about to say, I'm really liking this certain subsection of Nigerian authors. It seems like they have a formula of drama figured out, right? And it's intense drama because it's fueled by a lot of historical context, what's going on. And they just have a way of introducing all these subtle themes.
Yeah.
Right? That build these complex characters. And I kid you not, just before this podcast, I was like, this reminds me of like when I read Chinua, and it's right up there with Chinua's book. Dare I say it, might even be better.
I'd say better because I found it a bit more relatable than with
Chinua's. Okay, yeah, apart. Things fall apart set the stage, and it was written quite a long time ago. Let's talk a little bit about why you find it relatable. You know, I like to start every podcast by sort of giving a summary of the book, a little introduction for people that are thinking about picking it up, but have not yet. Maybe watch book content to know how other people are feeling about a certain book.
Yeah.
So on that relatability point, it's a coming of age story, and who does not relate to a coming of age story, right? It tracks the life of a 15-year-old girl coming into herself, living in Nigeria. She stays in an estate. They call it a walled complex. No, a walled compound. Yeah. And all that means is a compound is like a large piece of land. It's one unit of land owned by one person, but it has different buildings on it. So you know how we're all kind of used to having just a house,
Yeah.
We don't think there's multiple buildings on your property. But I mean, nowadays it's more common, right? You have the house, you might have the servants' quarters, the maid's
Yeah, okay.
quarters.
No.
You might have a Wendy house for the security guard. Already we're pushing it though. It's like,
Yeah. I'm here like, what? Where exactly?
not a lot of people can relate to that, right? But it is a compound, and I think that just indicates you right off the bat that we're dealing with wealthy people. Also, where they're based. Where do they live again?
Egugu, it's something like that.
You almost got it.
It's something like that.
Enugu.
Missing the N.
Yeah, almost got it. They live in Enugu State, which is the capital city of. No, they live in Enugu, which is the capital city of Enugu State. And you know, when I read a book, I really like to go a little bit into the background of the author as well, because you often find gems. Writing a book is difficult, and writing a book to this level of detail, right? There's no way you can make this up. When I read the story, I was like, there's no way you can make this up. There must be somebody you know that you're writing this. You're modeling these people from people you know.
Yeah.
The situations were too specific. The feelings were too accurate. And she comes across as a profound writer for being able to express some of those things. But you go into her history and you realize that she's from Enugu herself. She was born in Enugu, Chimamanda. Right. So that already opens up a can of worms for me, because that makes sense. Right. It then makes sense. Her parents were working at a university, and there's a character in the book that works at a university. She was pretty smart. She was studying to be a medical doctor at some point at the University of Nigeria. It was still on the author. But she didn't finish. She always wanted to study humanities. Right. So. Then she went to, I guess she got scholarships to study in the United States. She got her Bachelor's of Arts. She even has if I'm not mistaken, a Master's in Fine Arts and Creative Writing. So this is why we were in for such a treat in this book. And I'm sure you didn't research this before you read this, but you could tell that the book was just, I mean, I was surprised. Yeah. I was surprised, and we'll get into it a little bit. So she goes and then she studies that. She has a Master's of Arts in African Studies from Yale University. That's Yale, right? And I think all of that education, whether she completed that education before writing this book or not, then gives value. Or you see the value. I don't think it's the education that makes her as smart as she is. Or those credentials, but it just gives us an insight into the kind of brain that is Chimamanda. So they live in Egusi State. Enugu. Sorry, I said Egusi. That's a bit racist. Katako would say that's a bit racist.
Low key.
Tough. It's a different culture. They live in Enugu. Do you know anything about Enugu?
No, I didn't do any research. I went straight into reading the story, and that was it. I was like, what? No, I need to read it again. I wasn't even thinking of getting background information. I just wanted to go back in there.
Of course. No. It makes sense. Just reading the book is enough, by the way. This is just my little pet peeve. This is my thing, right? This is my strength. So Enugu, interesting city. So it's one of the more developed parts of southeastern Nigeria, right? It's well planned. It has well planned districts. It has good roads and infrastructure. It has fertile lands and a very beautiful topography. So lots of hills, right? Think Cape Town. And mountains, right? It's actually surrounded by mountains, just like Cape Town, right? And it even has like natural features like waterfalls. There's a huge waterfall over somewhere in the state that's like a tourist attraction. It's compared a lot to Abuja, which I would assume is another state. And I would assume that it has a population of 820,000 people, but that's according to a census in 2006. So I would imagine that today, the stats are, I wouldn't be surprised if there's more than 1 million people, but that's about the size of a province in South Africa, right? It's about the size of a province. The word itself, the name of the city means top of the hill.
Okay.
Enu and Ngu, I think, top of the hill. And I think it's in Igbo language, right? Nigeria has 3 main cultural groups. The Igbo people, which we heard about in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart.
Yeah.
Yoruba, and then there's a third one, which I always kind of forget. Maybe starts with an H.
I don't know it.
Gonna have to forgive me, guys. This is initial impressions. This is first impressions. And I promise to learn a lot more. So that's a little bit about just general information about Enugu. If you go further into the history of the state, things get like deeper and darker. But I think they add to your understanding of the pathologies of the characters in this book. So a lot of African history, as we read it, is really detailed once settlers arrive, right? Which it starts to make me question whether we wrote down history at all. We did, right? I guess it goes down to also technology, information technology at the time, right? So I don't know if anywhere in Africa, if we had like formal printing presses, which was important for the sharing and distributing of books. We might have had writing technology. We might have invented stuff like papyrus, which is a type of paper. I'm pretty sure there are civilizations in Africa that could produce paper, but in order to copy a book, someone had to rewrite it.
Yeah.
If you don't have the printing press. So I think somehow that technology plays a big role in why a lot of history is from the colonizer's perspective. It's part of why books like this are important. It's also part of why Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart is so revered, because it was the first time an African was telling a story from an African's perspective. And reading this book made me realize just the importance of African voices in these spaces, because there's a level of culture and nuance you will just not get from reading it from the colonial's perspective. Anyways, colonizers arrive. The British Empire. British Empire arrives and colonizes. I think there were 2 tribes, 2 main tribes that were populating that land area. And then there's the discovery of coal. And Enugu is also called the coal state. So that can kind of give you an idea as to why it became one of the more developed areas. You know, you think about Johannesburg, which is Johannesburg, Johannes Mountain, right? And it was, Johannes Mountain.
Oh.
Light bulb, right?
Right there. Jeez. Okay.
But it was. You need to?
I'm just saying, this makes me realize how little of my own history I know, and maybe should start reading up on.
I mean, history is quite it's a rabbit hole, right? It can consume your whole life. But it does put a lot of things into perspective. So you start to realize that certain things that you take for granted, like the formation of states and provinces, had a motive. It was really a project. You can think of a province or a city like a company, just a huge one. So usually there's the discovery of something that's important. Well, to the colonial powers, this was raw materials. It's always been raw materials, right? Yeah. Because they were busy building their project of industrialization. And that makes history very complex, because a lot of that work of industrialization and standardization has improved all of human life today, but kind of made life suck for human life back then, right? A lot of people had to be sacrificed. And then it's hard to, like, that's why the conversation becomes complex, right? You try to, as a person coming into your own awareness and consciousness as a Black person, getting in akin to your own story, you try to villainize colonization, but there's a lot that we still don't understand about development that makes us unable to also recognize the benefits that we enjoy today. And I feel like people who carried out the colonial project feel like we're devolved in that sense. So it's like there is no black and white, although we'd like to all reduce it to black and white thinking. The truth is, before the discovery of penicillin and antibiotics, tuberculosis was killing 1 billion people a year around the world.
Yeah.
1 billion people a year. That's more than any war you can imagine. So the discovery of just those two breakthroughs in medicine has improved all of our life expectancy, right? You could get killed for anything. In fact, and I know I'm going off, we're going to get back, I promise. But stay with me. Part of Melinda Gates and foundation, Melinda and Bill Gates' foundation, why she even started her foundation was because there were still communities in Africa dying of diarrhea. And she thought that was appalling, right? So part of her work is providing medical cures for that. And just something as simple as birth control as well, which she thought was an important factor for poverty and wealth creation, is being able to plan and time your births. So history is a can of worms, right? Like, I didn't want to get at this part of the conversation yet, but I think since we're making the point, even if you think about the discovery of steel, I had this conversation with Katlego, right? What do you think about steel? Do you think it's like something that's just found, like it's a naturally occurring element?
I don't think steel as we know it is a naturally occurring element. I think it's something else before that, and then it has to go through a process, and then we have steel.
Yeah, that's a good observation. How did we figure that out?
Somebody had to have blown something up, and then steel.
and you know what? That's not a terrible insight, because a lot of innovation in history is because of a mistake. In fact, we spoke about penicillin. That was a mistake, right? You study how penicillin was discovered, and I think some scientists left mushrooms out somewhere, and they grew something on top of them. Maybe we'll look it up. Do you have the internet next to you?
I do.
Maybe just type in quickly on Google, how was penicillin discovered? And then maybe we'll revisit that. But on the point of steel is actually, before it's steel, it's iron. It's actually iron. Steel is a type of iron.
Okay. See, I knew it was not steel.
Exactly. And really the point is that it's a breakthrough in material science to come up with steel, because you have to take steel and you kind of have to like lace it with carbon, and then you get steel. You kind of remove
an explosion.
Yeah, you kind of remove all of the defective properties of iron. Iron is very corrosive as a material. It's hard, but it's corrosive, and it is a whole set of its own problems. Steel is harder. I think steel is harder than iron, if I'm not mistaken. So they found a way to make iron harder, and they took away a lot of its bad properties, and they came up with the most important material in modern civilization. So no steel, for example, and Michael Saylor, there's a series on YouTube called the Saylor series. He's the one who enlightened me on this. But no steel, no cities. No steel, no modern civilization. Steel is the difference. You build a house out of mud, right? As he points out, and you only get one story. It's that floor. That's all you're getting, right? When we're talking about a stable structure, and who knows how long it will last. You build a house out of wood, you'll get 2 stories as a stable structure, about 2 good stories. And who knows how long that building will last. You build a building out of brick and mortar and cement, and you get maybe about 5 stable stories. You will get a 5-story building.
Yeah.
Right? And again, that also has its lifespan. You introduce steel and you can build a 20-story, 40-story, 50-story, 100-story skyscraper just with the introduction of steel. Right?
Okay.
You introduce steel and elevators, you get modern buildings. And modern buildings are important for cities because of population density, meaning we don't need as much space on the ground to get a lot of people to live in the same place. And the world was now we're getting robots, but before then, the world was very dependent on human capital. Human capital, which is called labor, is one of the big factors of production. One of the main factors of production of the 3. Land, labor, capital. Land is scarce, and being able to fit 400 people working in an 80-story building in one place on one project is important for administration, saving. And then there's all these effects that we can't even account for. We'd have to have a whole conversation about business and supply chain. Right? So steel is important. The point is, the colonial project, we have no idea. See, just the conversation I just had with you in the past 10 minutes, nobody really thinks about that on a normal day.
No.
They don't know what they have. I go to the store, I get the headphones. That's what I know. Right? Yeah. I go to work at that building, at that company. Whoever built it, that's all I know. That's all I know. And colonizer are bad. So we need, I think, being part of a book club has elevated us in the sense that we get to have these conversations and they can be quite life-changing. So back to the story, how it relates to the story is Enugu gets colonized because of the discovery of coal. And then the British colonial project obviously develops its own administrative projects around there to start colonizing that space. And that leads to the development of that nation, which I would assume that Nigerians are quite proud of that state now. Right? They eventually get their independence, but places we brag about in South Africa, it's hard to admit how the colonial project played a part in that. I'm not saying that justifies the atrocities that were done in the name of colonialism and the slave trade, but again, you go into history and things start to get blurry. You start to realize that they themselves, while I was researching the states, that I spoke about 2 tribes that were already there, that had established a village. Yeah. There was something called slave raids, I think.
That's in Land of My Ancestors, yes.
Really? That's in our book
of the month. For you. I'm so sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Let me not ruin it for you. Yes.
Yeah, but basically they would go and collect slaves and then they would place them on the outer borders of wherever they stay as a form of protection. And then they would bring them to a place where they could be traded. So that we would even have to go study the transatlantic slave trade for us to then figure out that we played a part in selling servants. We have servants today, but we just don't want to fully admit that we do.
It's the compensating them for their efforts that makes it a little more.
Of course. That's kind of how white people felt with cheap labor.
Yeah.
That's kind of how they felt. Yeah, we paid them. That's the whole cheap labor. You can call that a slave a wage that we pay them. Because before paying them, you know what compensation was during the days of slavery? Well, you had to eat because you die if you don't. And then I wouldn't have a slave anymore. You'd have to sleep somewhere. You'd have to wear something. If you were sick, maybe something had to be done. You had to have some sort of medical care. That was your labor then. Maybe it wasn't money, but money is a technology that we evolved. So it gets blurry.
Yeah, okay.
And it's not nice to have a conversation. You need to be mature in order to reflect. So that's the state. It was colonized, and then that plays into the themes inside the book, which is there's heavy themes on colonialism and religion in the book, is there not? Why don't you speak on that a little bit? What did you think about the religious themes of the book?
I think I like that we got to see two versions of it. You know, it wasn't just the extremist, but we also got to see how one finds a way to integrate their culture alongside the Christianity that they're indoctrinated in. You know, because with Eugene, it wasn't even church over family. It was religion. It was religion over family. It was what he was taught is the word, and that's it. You know, even as things are happening.
Eugene is the father, right?
The father, yes. I remember all their names, like I was in it.
Clearly. Yeah. Okay. The father of the 50-year-old girl. Yes.
Yes. Basically the antagonist of the story.
Yeah.
Like from start to end. So he is the very extreme aspect of what religion can look like in your relationship, in a household. And then you get, is it Amadi? Father Amadi, who is a much softer, still incorporating Igbo, still saying that, yes, there is this Christian God, but there is still our culture and our beliefs and our songs. So I found that she was able to bring those contrasting differences. Because with was it Chinua? Yes, the things fall apart was just extreme from start to end. And it almost made you think, why would you even want religion in your household if it looks like this? But that's my comment.
I mean, how did you feel the fact that the protagonist was like, one would argue, the most devoted to his religion than anyone else in the book? Would you say that? And that's the antagonist. That's the bad guy. For me, that says something about the author, one, and then that's drama. That's dramatic to do that, right?
It is.
It's a lot of tension and conflict. So, did you have any thoughts about him as a religious person, or did you kind of maybe devoid him from the religion and be like, he does not represent what the religion represents, or he's not practicing it the right way? How did you feel? Did it cause any drama inside of you to see this religious figure do all the things that he did?
I felt it was, extreme, because now he pushes it onto his children and his wife in ways that they were stifled. Like they didn't think life could be any better than that, and I don't know if I identify as a Christian. I'm still figuring that out. But from my youth and growing up in a Christian church, it was conflicting. It was like, can my belief in God be that strong that it even hurts? Because at some point he was hurting the people that he cared for, as much as he was saying, I still love you, because he would still tell them in the pain that, no, I'm doing this for your good. I still love you. They highlight how Kambili likes little, what did she call it? Love sips. Even though they burnt her, she would have.
Yeah, I mean, so that's another theme in the book, right? Is that again, drama. I think this is why this book is great, because of the drama.
Yeah,
and there's a science to the drama, and I think as a masters of fine arts and creative writing, I think it's masterfully done in this book. So right off the bat, in the first chapter, where there's been some tension in the house, a book was thrown, right? And I don't want to ruin the book structure just yet, but the point is, in that same chapter, after the whole abuse ordeal took place, the father then, I think they made a point about the love sips, in the sense that the father did not offer one this time around. And what the love sip is every time the father makes a cup of tea, I ironically love this, his tea set is like an English old China tea set, right?
Yeah.
Because the father hates everything African, which is another powerful theme that comes through. He's devoided himself from his culture, like you said. He's a bit extreme. And every time he'd pour tea, while it was still scorching hot, he made his kids take the first sip out of it, and he called it a love sip. And then you get this drama or this complication of something that's supposed to be a sweet act. Because when I read that, I was like, that's cute for a father to be like, before I have any food, I offer it to my children to have the first sip. That's something that's supposed to be beautiful. And turns out the tea is always scorching hot and it burns their tongues. And that might seem like a small detail, but it's so intentional because that theme of love being something that destroys you, that kills you, is present in so many other places. And so many other in situations that the father is in. After he abuses you, let's say after he abuses their mom, he then goes and rubs the kid's shoulders, right? There was a scene, I don't know if you want to speak about it, where because Kimbili, which is the daughter, she has an older brother, by the way, we didn't do a whole character run. We didn't do a whole character run, but we're already in it, so let's talk about it. There's a scene where the father is angry because she did not disclose. This is later in the book. The father does not disclose that his father, the grandfather, was over at his sister's place. And the father does not like his own father, right? Because his own father is more traditional. He advocates for traditional beliefs. And this guy, what'd you say, Eugene was his name? He's completely divorced. He sees everything African as evil, as something that will condemn you to hell, something that's of lower class. He's smart, right? He's a businessman, a rich one. Clearly, we mentioned in the beginning that they're rich. So he even looks down on it from a point of he feels like it's less evolved. And that was personal reflections for me. But he gets very mad at the fact that his daughter is spending time with his father, so mad that he pours boiling water on her feet, something like that. He makes a stand in.
No, all right. The first time when he found out, he came to pick them up. It's when they discovered them with the portrait that he lost it and went to then burn their feet.
Okay, I'm mixing it up.
It's the portrait. Yeah, the portrait is what really threw him off because this is also after he had passed away. So you might find he was even competing with the death of his father, but his father being a heathen, and now his kids are being the heathens of this man.
Yeah.
Because even the way they describe how angry he gets. Have you ever been so angry you just... Okay, I've never been that angry, but I've seen someone get that angry. And I felt everything.
My goodness.
That's so,
Right. He abuses this girl. Yeah, he abuses this girl so bad that one of the incidents, she even gets hospitalized. She's not the only one that gets hospitalized from this man's abuses. But then he's there beside her on the hospital bed, telling her everything will be okay. Again, back to that same theme of love being the thing that kills you, like this contrast between love and abuse, right? And that, I think that mixes it up in the children's heads, because then you don't get to process abuse for what it is, or you don't get to call somebody out a villain as early as you should. Jaja's the one that eventually rebels first, right? Because he starts, when we find out that the mom is pregnant, his wife, then Jaja says some heartbreaking words. He says, oh, when Kimbili is telling Jaja, her brother, that mom is pregnant, Jaja says that, don't worry, we'll protect him. Oh, talking about the baby.
Yeah.
And then Kimbili reflects on, like, she knew he was talking about protect him from dad. And that was like heartbreaking, because Kimbili was tapped out. Kimbili was convinced that this man is... Yeah, he started to drift away from the family. At some point, he had enough. Yeah. It's complex because we start the story right at the, like, what's happening currently, but then we go into the past and then we come back.
Yeah.
Right. So we are already put in a situation where Jaja has rebelled. The dad is in those beginning scenes, the dad is starting to lose groups of his own family. But I found it interesting, the fact that it was a religious extremist that was the antagonist of the book. There's a quote, and Miles posted it on his status the other day. I know it from back. I once wrote a song with the quote in it, right? I used to write music. And the quote is, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." Right? Powerful quote. On the themes of the books that we've read prior, it's always good intentions do not protect you do not make you immune from creating disaster.
Yes.
Currently, we have wars that are being fought on good intentions. Israel thinks it has the right intentions, that it's trying to, Ukraine feels the same way, that it's protecting democracy. And then you have all these proxy wars. And Russia's the enemy, and millions of people die because of good intentions. History is filled of stories just like that, pastors with good intentions making their congregation. Well, you can argue whether they had good intentions or not, but making their congregation do extreme things. Cults where a group of people have all killed themselves. So she does point that out, but I think it's even more subtle than the extreme cases of war and cults, and it's more subtle. Even in our relationships, in places we don't really expect things to turn out badly, our good intentions end up hurting the people that we love, right? In interpersonal relationships, it's deep. You might, for example, I'm in a relationship and I convinced my partner to go back to school. That's a good intention. And I'm only telling the story to show how it's even in like less extreme examples. So go back to school. That seems like a good thing. But what if going back to school then makes her unhappy? And what if working at a corporate job then makes her depressed? And then what if being depressed makes her commit suicide?
Jeez, but yeah.
Or makes her give up on her dreams. Sorry, I always tend to go to the extreme.
Yeah, that's a bit.
I'm just showing you. It's a metaphorical thing to make a point. How a small little innocent action can lead to such consequential things. It's called a butterfly. There's also something called the butterfly effect that speaks to this scientifically, right? Okay, so let's start. Let's take a step back and just talk about these characters for a bit, right? Can you give us a rundown of all the characters that you remember in the book?
Okay, we have Eugene. That's Big Papa. You can actually see that he is a nice man. He is just on the extremist of the religion. And if you don't fall within what he perceives as the right way, then you are either cast out, you are punished, you are going to hell. But within his view of rightness, he gives you money. Like when he took care of his co-worker's family after he passed away. I don't know if that's too much, but yes.
Spoiler alert, everyone.
Spoiler alert. So even when his father passed away, he still ensured that funeral happened the way they wanted it to happen. They were never short of what they needed to complete that funeral. The auntie was happy. She had all the money, could get all the cows. So you could see that his heart may have been more in the right place, but the actions, the principles, the perspectives were very left. And then you get his wife. I don't know. I can't remember her name. She makes me so sad. Like everything that she goes through to the end. And I guess she did love him, but at the same time, I want to say Stockholm. Because she allows him to punish these children, but to quite extreme extents. It's only once Kumbili got hospitalized did she realize that, oh man, it can actually get this bad. She's sitting there. It's never been this bad before. I know she loves everyone there, but I think she's also conflicted between should she protect her children and do something about it, or should she remain and respect and be the wife that she, may have been raised to be. Because it was still.
It was still?
Yes.
No, sorry, you were saying it was still?
Yeah. So she, being the wife that she may have been raised to be, that's someone who speak when spoken to, make sure your husband is always taken care of, and then the kids. That's probably how she was raised to be a wife. And then we have the Aunt Ifema. I think that's how you say it. I've been trying to pronounce these.
Yeah, it can be difficult first learning about it, especially if you just read it, right? You didn't hear anyone pronounce the names. But the wife's name is Beatrice. Just putting it out there.
Oh, Beatrice. Okay.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, I think they say it like twice in the whole book. Maybe that's why.
Much.
So then there's Eugene's sister, the aunt. She's loud, she's traditional and Christian, and she's a free spirit. And she'll say her word, she'll say her piece. They describe her as someone who really takes up room. When she laughs, you'll hear her across the street. That's
we all
how
have
they
that
describe
aunt, don't
her.
we?
Yes.
We all do.
And then as we go to the children, so Eugene and Beatrice's children are Kumbili, who's 15. This is her story, her view of how everything happens. And really you see how the way she was raised has kind of stifled her personality.
She's really shy in the beginning. Yeah.
Very shy. I could see a bit of myself there. I was like, damn girl, you'll figure it out though. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's almost, I'm almost scared for her, because even when I was like, please get first, please get first, please get first. Every time we'd come to the point of her getting her report. After the first time we saw that getting second doesn't work.
Yeah,
it's not enough.
Why did you tell them what happens when she does not get first place? This is a crazy story, man. This is an insane story. What happens when she doesn't get first place?
What did happen? Oh my gosh.
She got
punished.
Was it beaten? Yeah, she got beaten. Right? She got beaten. And I think to the point of hospitalization. I might be mistaken, but I think
no, the hospitalization
it happened twice.
When things did it happen twice?
It happened
Why do I
twice.
feel like it only happened once?
She was hospitalized twice. And I look, I could be getting this wrong. Maybe I'll look it up, but yes, she was beaten. If she doesn't get number one at school, she gets beaten.
Yeah. And she gets told that I don't pay those school fees for you to come second.
My goodness.
Oh.
And then he brings God into it. Like, God wants the best for you. Okay, sorry, continue.
So yes, so that's our poor protagonist of the story. That's Kumbili. And then she has an older brother. We don't learn too much about him, but we learn that he is protective of his family, and that he wants to try and be the leader for them. That's why, as the story leads on, we learn that he is willing to sacrifice quite a lot to ensure that they remain safe, and he's always talking about, I want to protect. And he's always, when it comes to his father, he doesn't say too much, because he knows that whatever he has to say is not going to be nice.
Yeah.
You see that quite early. The first chapter, you can see that as he's rebelling, he's like, nah, I'm actually over this. So that's the older brother. I think he's 2 years older.
Yeah, he's 17.
Yeah. Okay. So he's 17. And then there's the cousins. Is it Anaka or Amaka?
There's 3 of them. That's what I know.
The oldest daughter, is Anaka in the middle? Sorry. The oldest son is Obiora. Ooh, I can spell these. And then in the middle is Anaka. And then the youngest is Chimeka, something like that. So they're three on Auntie Femi's children. We never hear about a father. We don't know.
Yeah.
So you can see that these children are an opposite to Kimbili and her brother. They are taught to laugh, just enjoy life. Yes, we don't have everything your cousins have, but at least you can laugh. You know, you can see that they enjoy their day to day. They get to enjoy each other's company. Even when the first time you realize Camille hasn't laughed actually for like the first half of this book. You know, it brings that up and you go, oh, wow, that's a little sad. You know, so you can see the difference between Auntie Fema's side of the family and Eugene's family, you know, and how almost their connection to their culture still keeps them just a little bit happier, as much as they still go to mass on Sundays and have Father Amadi visit and do his thing. But those are the main characters of the book. And then we have our little sub characters, which is Father Amadi. This is the priest of, I don't know if I should spoil it, but this is the priest that does help Kumbili. I think as we go, we'll spoil it some more.
Yeah.
The lighter touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he helps her out on that side. And then here we have Eugene's co-workers. This is Adekoka and his wife and kids, but they only come up briefly. And then we have the father. The main figurehead of the tree is Babans Nku.
I mean, it's just a try.
The father of Eugene and Auntie Feme. So he's the traditionalist. He still believes in, what is it, that festival they go to? That festival sounded very interesting with the spirits.
You're going to have to help me out with that one.
Is it Okupa? Or is that something else? Ooh, I can't remember the festival.
This is why we have to, I mean, we do have to read the book again. And I'm so glad that it's introducing us to a whole different culture, much like Chino's book as well. You might not be able to pronounce the names at first. And again, these are for everyone out there, maybe people who are Nigerian tuning in and are mad, like these South Africans won't even, please. We really actually would love to keep learning about this, right? Now I'm solid, at least with my understanding of, the different tribes or the different main cultural groups, and even understanding that there's subgroups. So that's a whole nother world as well. Also, Nigeria is a big country. Like, what? How many people? Much more than South Africa. That's what I know. I don't want to get the number wrong, but it's a huge country, and that amount of concentration of people will naturally have a lot of nuances and intricacies that if you've never traveled, if you've never been to Nigeria, it's difficult then to just catch it. Again, from reading a book, these are descriptions that we're getting that we have to imagine. We're not even hearing the language. We're not hearing the people pronounce. We're kind of hearing it all in our own head. But no excuse. We are diving more into the culture. In fact,
we'll get better.
Yeah, we will. And before we even get more into some of those sub-characters, one of the thoughts that I had earlier, if you will allow me to point out, is that I started to, although our private school education might be what's contributing to our inability to pronounce some of these names and all of that, but I started to appreciate, I was in the shower, in fact, just having some reflections on that private schooling education and what it did for me. So I started, apart from the normal things you would think, I think being at a private school is not so much more for what people might assume, like the access to good facilities, maybe better teachers. But for me, it was really the network of people that came around, that were at those schools. And here's a unique thing that happened. What I noticed is that, first of all, South Africa is already a melting pot of different cultures. South Africa has everyone from the world you can imagine. At some point lives here, has a small subculture here, is welcomed here, is able to migrate here, has business here. There's a lot going on in South Africa. But what growing up in this sheltered environment did for me is that just typically by a process of the selection criteria for the school, and also the bigger economic selection that's at play, where only people who maybe are lot more stable and consistent with their income, people that have a two-person household income. So kids are raised in a standard of having both a mother and a father. Those are the kind of people that would go to a private school. And you take that and you mix it with the melting pot. I start to realize that I've seen somewhat a representation of the best version of every culture at my school. And if people can get their children into a school where there's multiple cultures mixing, mixed schools, where there's white people, but there's also all kind Indian people, maybe there's a foreign exchange program where they take in foreign exchange students as well. If you can get your child into a school like that, I think that foundationally was so important for me, because today, the people, my best friends and the people in this book club, I've noticed many of my friends are not from South Africa. So you have Mauzi Laura, right?
Okay, yeah.
And he's Nigerian, but he's a doctor. He studied at UCT and he's Nigerian. Very close friend of mine, one of the smartest people I know in my life, somebody I model a lot of my ambition, I guess, and discipline. And also, yeah, somebody that just makes me feel like I need to do better in life, right?
Yeah.
That's Mauzi Laura. My other close friend, Emmanuel Aisi, also part of this book club. If you go back to our other episodes, you'll meet these people. He's originally from Ghana, right? And again, this is probably one of the best friends I've ever had. When he left PLK, he's a scientist. He studied geomatics and he's working for a renewable energy company, right? And when he left PLK, I unexpectedly broke down. Like I couldn't take it. I was very sad, right? We're still friends today, but that's, again, probably one of the best friends I'll ever have. One of the best friends I have and one of the best friends I'll ever have. Mute, Idolo, right? He's also been on our book. In fact, he was in our previous episode. That's another close friend. Yeah. He's from Nigeria. I think going to this book made me start to think about the stuff around me. Like, because you don't think about it. You just, okay, these are my friends. Oh yeah, you're originally from Nigeria. Okay, you're having trouble with Home Affairs Administration. Why don't they just give you, because I've grown up with them, I'd be confused. Why don't they just give you your papers? I have another friend that lives right across me. His name is Michael Mokombachoto. He's Zimbabwe, right? Another close friend of mine that reconnected me with all of these friends. That's my friend group. I don't have South African friends outside of Katlego, right? Best friend, shout out, best friend, shout out. I don't have, right? And what that has done, why that was important, is because when you step out of that protected environment, you're going to be met with mainstream media. And mainstream media really speaks on your fears. It's antagonizing by nature. And it's Vusi Timakwaya likes to say, playing to the gallery of comments. What it does is it's talking to the everyday person who wants the largest possible audience, and it works on all of their fears. Not me, the privileged. I'm privileged in the sense of where I come from. So I know that intrinsically there is nothing different between me and Miles and Emmanuel. In fact, these are the people that I've kept closest to me. But not everyone understands that. Some people think that they truly believe that selling drugs is a cultural thing, not an environmental thing. They believe that Nigerians sell drugs. And you can't convince them otherwise, right? They don't think it's an environmental thing, because here I am in a school full of foreigners and none of the, I told you about scientists, doctors. Mute is an engineer. It's an environmental thing. And it's not like South Africans are not selling drugs too. You know, maybe the Nigerians are just in that environment, are a little bit smarter, you know, a little bit more adapted to difficult situations, have a little bit more to lose, right? And there's a threat thing going on. So but you can't, if you look at mainstream media, you cannot think otherwise. that it's not a cultural thing. They think as a culture, Nigerians look up to drug dealers and scammers. It's a touchy subject, and there's truth on both sides, which is never nice to say. These things you can pick out, but it's not. I mean, ontological design, right? So your environment designs you, and then you just in turn design it back, right? So in that sense, there's truth on both sides, but it's never to what people. You just need a more sober mind to look at things and understand what's more important, which is fundamental. That given a different environment, things can change. Reading this book, and Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart makes me realize how much more we have in common than we have different. Because these characters could have been South African. The dad could have been South African. Like I said,
100%.
We all have that aunt, right? There's many things. You relate to Kimbili, which you're about to tell me about. But you relate to Kimbili a lot. And it's like, that's why African stories are so important, because you realize like we have the same problems. The dad has a hatred for his own culture. How many South Africans do I know, right, who have demonized African spiritual practices and don't even want to look at it? So I can't, and you have to go through the journey yourself. I can't emphasize it here. You've probably heard these words before, but you have to go into the journey of getting as deep as reading literature about another culture to realize that we're exactly we're the same, right? And the divisions are so frivolous. Controversial topic, but let's go back to those two characters. Let's go back to those two characters that you introduced first, which is the mom and the dad. You said something very important. You said you have empathy for the dad. You said you can actually realize he's a good person. How dare you say that?
No, like it's I think had he grown up in a slightly different environment, he may have been a kinder person. He mentions the one time he was punished at church for masturbating and it was bad. So imagine that every day for another 15, 20 years, because he was still a child or a teenager when he went into that church. And I like to use indoctrinated because it's second to being brainwashed. So even from then I could say, okay, it's the church that somewhat did this to him, because they've made sure that loving God is receiving punishment.
Spare the child, spare the rod.
That's how he's been taught. Because like I said, as much as he didn't cry tears and his heart didn't break when his father passed away, he still made sure that the family could bury him the way he wanted to be buried. They made sure they could afford the cows, afford the rituals, as much as they were heathenistic to him. And even with his colleague, which turned out to actually be his best friend, when he passed away, he made sure that the wife and I don't know if it was 2 kids or what, he got a trust for them. He made sure that they were at least secure that these kids would finish school.
So you saw that.
So yeah, but I saw it more with the father part, because at some point I was like, he's not even going to pay for this funeral. He's going to go about his life. That's what I thought initially. But he still gave the money. And you could see from Auntie Fema the way she says, no, we'll just ask Eugene. More often he would give her the money, as much as he did not agree with whatever she was going to use that money for.
I mean, I agree with you, actually. But it's just, I didn't expect many people to pull out that insight from here to say that he would have been a good person given a different set of environments, just because of the scale of things that happen. I think he almost I think he almost kills his daughter, right? His daughter almost dies from.
He does. And his wife. He kills his 2 unborn children.
I mean,
by the way.
Oh, goodness me. What? Guys, pick up this book. Just read. So to say that he would have been a good person and still see his humanity is very mature, right? It's like, man, they've made him so difficult to like, but you almost see his limitations. it speaks to how we're all kind of capable of becoming tyrants. And I think Chimamanda doesn't do this intentionally, but she writes the story in so much detail that you can infer the stuff if you want. Reading about Eugene made me think about where I've been a tyrant in my life. And it might not be obvious to ourselves when we reflect, but I think about how you treat lesser beings. If you want to understand white people as well, and if you want to understand the slave trade, think about how you treat animals, right? Because that's how they saw you. And it's hard to think about a world where there's a certain group of people that feel like they're just so much more evolved than you, that you are literally like animals. It's hard to imagine that, but that's how they saw you. And that's how they felt in relation to you when they saw your civilization and they saw their civilization. We think there's a lot, again, remember that whole chat I had in the beginning about history? There's a lot we don't understand about history. A lot, we don't even understand the importance of standardization and systems. So much so that we have all these different African languages, and we only started really creating dictionaries for them after watching white people create dictionaries. And who knows what are the first order and second order consequences of not having one language as a group of people? What can you really achieve without one language? We already spoke in the previous conversation about how language is the foundation for law. So you can't even create empires. You can't even and in a time where human capital was the main factor of production that determined productivity, which is what an economy is all about, and where development typically happens. If you're these small tribes, you can't develop. That's why you only go as far as certain types of houses, because it takes more people to produce better things. And then it takes mechanization and standardization. And standardization requires us all having a common language, right? We all, when we build train tracks, we all build them the same width across provinces, right? All the train tracks are exactly, that's because there's a standard. All the plugs in South Africa are the same.
Yeah.
All the bottle caps. You don't know how much time and energy that's saving you to do other things, to discover other things. It would just take a deep study. And it's not the point of this conversation. That's why I don't want to get too deep into it. But there was a big gap in development between Africans and Europeans. And you can argue that, okay, Africans were the first to evolve and we gave them the stuff. And sure, that's true as well, right? It can all be true. We just need to have a mature conversation about it. I mean, if you study it, there is a lot of civilization that started in Africa, but something rapidly accelerated it in Europe. And you can argue also, there's many theories for how it accelerates in Europe. One could just be generic inferiority and a common enemy, right? So white people being a threat of extinction just by interbreeding. If we all sleep together, white people stop to exist because they have the recessive gene and you have the dominant gene, right? Two black people get together, have a baby. They can have a baby with white skin and blonde hair and blue eyes, and you'll call that an albino. Two white people can't get together and have a black baby. That's genetic. Touchy subjects. Touchy subjects.
That's actually,
But so because they are intrinsically threatened by the sheer number of people with the dominant gene, they have a common enemy that they can fight, and an easy thing to pull them together, which is like their skin, which is the largest organ that a human has, right? And easy recognizable. So that takes a whole study of many different things to understand those things. Point is, different people see you as animals. And it makes me reflect on where else have I been a tyrant? And I think about animals and pets, right? I think about a time where the dog during the night, ate the leather the leather chair that we put outside. It teared up all the feelings on the inside. And I didn't know how else to communicate to this dog that this is wrong, other than getting a small little wooden rod and hitting it on the
Okay,
bum,
yeah.
right? I didn't know any other way. And mom was also here, like, yo, your dogs, I'm gonna chase your dogs away. And so I hit the dog, it cries. I can see they're terrified, like this huge human being with a stick. They're more terrified by my size than how hard I'm actually hitting them. And then after doing that, I think to myself, but I'm doing this because I love them and I don't want them. You see, then you start going through the same thought process. It's because I love them and I want them to act in line. There's other ways to train dogs, of course. If you're going to get dogs, first of all, they're not your security guards, right? So they need to be raised. Also, how do we get pets? If you're not buying it at the pet shop, a lot of Black people just get them from their friends.
Yeah, my friend's neighbor's friend,
had dogs, had puppies, and they gave me a puppy. You're separating the puppy from his mom. Superimpose that onto slavery and just think about how different that is. Selling of human beings and trading of human beings and beating human beings to get into line and then teaching human beings your religion. It's blurrier than you think. So now I to myself don't. That's why if the dogs one day started a whole revolution,
revolt,
and all their dialogue would just talk about how let's say the dogs learn how to speak English, right? Somehow they started learning language from every time we trained them over millions of years. You know, they know how to sit, they know how to fetch, they know how to, let's say they start being able to speak over millions of years of evolution. And then they start talking smack about humanity and how terrible humanity has treated dogs its whole life and separated it from his moms and chained it up, in the backyard. And sometimes they wouldn't even give you food. They didn't really care about you like that. They put themselves, you can start to see a story that you can superimpose on humanity. But I would be like, if it wasn't for us, you dogs wouldn't have this life and these houses and the civilization and these roads. And,
slippery slope.
Very quickly a slippery slope. That's a tough thing to entertain, but it shows you how life is just humbling. And that's the only example I could find where, probably not only, but the most obvious example where I was as tyrannical as this person. That allows you to relate to Eugene more in the sense that he did not see any other way. He did not have the communication skills to guide his family. And he thought the only way to get respect is through natural law, to be feared big. He's beating his child, but so that she's number one in class. That's an act of love to him.
Yeah.
For the observer, it's crazy. So how many more situations could we observe you and think, that's terrible what you're doing to this person? And meanwhile, you're thinking, terrible? Me?
I mean, like when you said the love sips, when you thought they were cute, I didn't immediately think they were cute. Maybe it's the woman motherly thing, because I was like, why would you give your child scalding hot tea? Like, that's love,
It's a love sip. Okay, but fair point. The imagery in the book is insane. Now when they're eating their dinner, she can't taste the food because her tongue is burnt. I mean, that's such a small example.
And she'll never say, she'll never say, actually, it's a bit hot. Can you wait? Never. She'll take those sips as it burns her because that's all she knows.
And that's the only form of love she gets. There's a part in the story, early on in the book, the father comes home with like new products. A new drink.
Oh,
What kind of juice was it? Cashew juice. Right? And the father owns a factory that they're very rich. There's also these detailed descriptions of which maybe I'll pull up an example. I do have annotated notes because I annotate my book with these tags. They always.
I try to. I love those. I have those as well, wherever mine are. But the way I read through this book,
It just, this, and I'm not typically a fiction person, but this book did it for me. I'm excited. So
no, it was good.
So here's this juice that they all tasting, and they all scared to tell the dad the truth, by the way. Like they didn't think it was that good. And it was like, this is in the background of some drama that was already happening. Chimamanda has this powerful way of writing. Like she set up that event so beautifully, right? In this luxurious home. But then she just small descriptions about how the labels were kind of faded, like starts to introduce decay. Like she's so good. She's so good. And then right at the like most tense part of the story, they're sitting around the table, they're tasting this, something awkward happens. And the mom is trying to quell everything, is trying to calm down everything by still talking about the juice. Like, yeah, it tastes like this.
Wasn't that when? Because it would have been Jaja saying or not saying something that tended to make dinners awkward.
Yeah, I think Jaja was like being rebellious still. And then the mom caught this. The mom didn't want the dad to be angry. She's still talking about the juice. Yeah, and then again, Chimamanda writes this better than I can describe it. Please read it for yourself because it's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. And right at the tipping point of the tension, she then describes that same juice as like looking like pee. And the imagery is just, at that point, I was like, this woman is a poet. How do you do that with a story? You know? I was like, I was blown away. I was blown away.
No, it was, yeah. I think something that at least warmed my heart was how at some point her cousins started to warm up to them and be like, come, be a kid with us. Learn to laugh. Even how they were encouraging her to say what you want. Ask us what you're thinking because we're not going to guess your information.
You said you relate to Kimbili. Touch on that.
More in the... more on her shelteredness. No, I have amazing parents. They're not overly religious. I have always had a choice in whatever it is I wanted to do. So it's nothing with my upbringing, but necessarily my own personality. You know, what is the word? I relate. There it is. I relate with 15-year-old me relates with 15-year-old her in that communicating things was like, whatever, man. I just, as long as I do what I need to do and it's right, we'll keep it moving kind of thing. And then I've had people who's had to pull me out of that and say, dude, we can't read your mind. You need to say, what do you want? Kind of thing. And I was like, oh, and the way Chimamanda is able to describe her feelings, how it feels like it's stuck in her throat. I sat there like, oh, she gets it. She totally gets it.
Wow.
So that's where I found I related with her quite a lot. I was like, it feels like even with maybe different parents, that introvertedness may have still remained if they were not the type to pull her out. Yeah. I think that's, yeah.
So maybe it's partly due to how important her parents are. I think maybe you guys can relate in that sense. Do you think maybe there's just this thing of like get in line and try not to knock too many walls down because there's already an establishment here that works, right?
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
So maybe it's
because her parents. I wouldn't say she held her parents to an equal degree, but yes, her parents were very, very important. So I think their acceptance, their not recognition, their appreciation, I'm not finding the word, but along those words was very important. And there it is. Yes, their validation was key, especially her father's, because she, I'm guessing, could already see that mom was yes, mom. So as long as Papa was happy, the house was happy, I am happy. That Yeah, so that validation from her father was very, very important. I don't know about validation, but I had it in my head that I needed to make sure I get what they want right. It's now that I'm older that had I learned to maybe come out to them, they would have let me know, no, there's no pressure. But as a teenager, you think you know what's up. You think you know what your parents are thinking. So
You do. You do.
So
this book is described as an intoxicating story. It's won awards. I'm giving it a 5-star. I can't critique it. I can't. Can you find anything wrong with this book?
There is maybe one grammar error, but like that's me being that's
the editor, right?
That's the editor. That's not even the story. That's just
yeah.
But I was no. This is definitely personally one of the best books I think we've read in the club so far for me, because I'm a fiction person. I love my fiction.
Yeah, this is definitely going to make me read more fiction books. I related to a lot, of course. Like, we didn't even touch on the fact that there's a coup happening in the story.
Oh, yes.
Right? There's a whole military coup. The dad also owns a newspaper. I don't know if we're spilling too many details about the book, actually. And not
That's why I'm like, this is no longer now we're just like, we're going in. That's why I'm like, I wanted to go at the end as well, because what? What? Like that was the last straw on the camel's back for the mom. That I didn't see that coming at all.
I don't want to say it. You're gonna have to read.
That's what I don't want to say. That's what I'm like, the ending you have to read. You cannot, because you do not see it coming. You just don't.
Yeah, actually, this story is more than it's gonna be hard for me to read a better story than this. If you know a better story, tell me. I'm not just saying that. This was incredible. The drama, the setup, the characters. Chimamanda is like so educated. And I get why they rave about her. You almost sound like a crazy person talking about this book, because it's phenomenal. And I related to many parts. Of course, there's a whole military coup. In fact, maybe let's share some notes. This is just to show you how reality kind of inspires art. And I think why this is so good is because it just shows that Chimamanda has an understanding of how all of these social forces, when they come together, that's what creates the individual, right? She has an understanding of how the microcosm kind of expands out and models out into the macrocosm, how a family becomes a government, and how a government affects a family, vice versa. So I want to share my screen, actually. Maybe this will be valuable to go through, to be able to see. So we read here, right? We spoke about this a bit, right? Coal mining opportunities is what this is not about the book, but the actual place that the book is set in Enugu. Yeah. Coal mining opportunities in Enugu attracted people throughout the region. This marked the core of the first urban settlement, of which is what today is known as simply Enugu. Enugu developed as one of the few cities in West Africa created entirely from European contact, right? In 1958, Enugu had more than 8,000 coal mines, many managing individual plots. As of 2005, there are no significant coal mining activities. You look at videos of the place now, and although Nigerians are quite proud of it and the city looks good and maybe there are some developments, I think I might be wrong. I'd have to be corrected. The general trend of corruption, the corruption of the Nigerian government, has put that place on a decline, much like how I don't know if you've ever seen pictures and videos of Johannesburg in the 1960s and 70s versus Johannesburg now. Whereas we talk about Johannesburg as one of the greatest cities in South Africa. It has all these
Not
impressive
CBD
things.
though.
But you go to Johannesburg and you're like, there's something very wrong. The city's rotting. And Johannesburg, for me, outside of the main, that's why you need to tap out of the main stream media and think for yourself, because it's not such a great place to live anymore. In South Africa, there are certainly places where you can live a lot more peacefully and safe with still similar amounts of luxury. The only problem is jobs and where people are coalesced. But it seems like it's on a downtrend without, if we don't get serious intervention. So you look at, I say this because you look at Enugu, videos of Enugu, and although it's spoken in the media as this great place, you look at little things where you're like, those are signs of like deterioration and lack of upkeep and etc. etc. We keep reading a little bit more. You find out that the Nigerian movie industry, so Enugu was the primary filming location for Nollywood. That kind of gives you an idea of how important the city is, and just how rich for Kimbili.
Yes.
For her parents to be rich and influential in the city is really something to behold, and it speaks to the pressures that they faced. The dad also owned a media company, a newspaper publisher. So you think about how today we talk about the white monopoly capitalists. Again, controversial word. You can debate about it. But how industrialists, sorry, not to be too contentious, then just to call them industrialists, the white industrialists also have stake in media companies. They have independent platforms that they would like to speak outside of the government. Like the South African Broadcasting Commission is the main broadcaster and the government's mouthpiece. And in order to counter that, you have ENCA, which are like an E-media, and then the umbrella companies like Prime Media that owns all of that. They have their own independent platform, Biz News, where they speak their own news, and then you have extremists on both sides pointing out about the biases of each side, and but then it's more complicated than that, because the SABC is like, black people hate themselves, and instead of pushing a positive agenda on the government, the SABC sometimes feels like the op when you're reading the news, and portraying all these negative stories about the government. It's beautiful to observe human nature. But there are parallels, right? There are parallels in the story. And again, I don't want to spoil another plot point, but something happens to the editor of the father's newspaper just for having a political opinion, right? You're going to have to read to find out what that is. I think the part that I really wanted to point out exactly here. So here, right? The first settlement in Enugu area was the small Nike village of Ugui.
I'm glad you said it.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Which was present since the era of the Atlantic slave trade. Nike, in the Igbo language, means strength and power. The Nike people, which I would imagine, I've never seen them, but I think I did a quick Google. These are like native black people of this area. And these people got most of their land through slave raiding. Right?
Oh, damn.
Yeah. As the area was mostly unsettled, the Nike people used slaves as part of their defense strategy and placed slave camps at the edges of their territories so that it was harder for an enemy to access freeborn people. So it's like we were selling our own people out. And this is the part that I wanted to really share with you, because there was an establishment of a state in the history of Enugu. Again, now we are not talking about the book, and I just need to find the state.
Yeah, we're trying to get to the coup.
Yeah. Trying to get to the coup. Which should come up soon. If I don't find it, I think I tried to Google it. Okay, so at some point, Nigeria gets its independency and it establishes a republic. Like today we have, I can't see it here, but I'll just explain it. They establish a republic. Like today we have the Republic of South Africa, right? And again, we need to really study our history. We need to understand what a republic actually is. A lot of these things then commingle, but a republic is the foundation of why we call you the public in a republic, right? That stuff like that should click. And civilization is why we call you a civilian and why you have civic duties. It's like all of these things are related and have a history, and the more you study it, the more insights that you get. But I did try to look for it. I can't find the state now, the name of the state that was created. But a state was created, and that state was short-lived because there was a military coup. So military coup is when the military or armed forces decide to take up government by force. And it's kind of antithetical to... It's antithetical to democracy, where the people choose their leaders. In fact, in the book, right? In the book, there's a new president, and then there's a contention with that word president. It's like, it's not a president, all right? I don't know who said it, but it's not a president because he was not voted for. Calling him a president would assume that we chose him. That's a head of state, and apparently that's the difference between a
I think
president.
that was Jaja.
Okay. Yeah, and then the dad was happy about that, and then he really felt jealous that I wish I said that.
Yeah.
Right. So this actually happened in Enugu's history, and that's, I think, what makes, I think, Chimamanda's writing, what makes it so real is that it's based on real things. I think it's based on real people. There's a movie by Tyler Perry. He's one of his most recent, and I hate to throw him under the bus, but part of the critiques me and my partner had about it was that it just felt unrealistic, like made up. I forgot which movie it was. One of his romantic thriller type movies. And I think this is the opposite, right? This is filled with drama, packed with drama, but imbued by things that everyone can relate to and can actually see happening. That's really my take on the book. Maybe I'll share with you. Actually, let me do a new share.
The penicillin was a something that he had left at home, and when he came back, it was penicillin.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, but yeah, mycelium, right? He left some mycelium out, something related to mushroom sprouts, and we discovered penicillin by mistake. Half of history is like that. Half of scientific history is just trial and error and discoveries of that sort. What I wanted to share, yes, with sound, was maybe let's just listen to a little bit about the history of Enugu.
The Cold War was filled with civil wars and revolutions, and normally those civil wars would see the US-led West on one side with the communist world on the other. But when the Nigerian Civil War kicked off in 1967 and saw this region break away as the Republic of Biafra, the sides were much less clear. The Nigerian government...
Okay, so that's the republic that had formed, the Republic of Biafra. Sorry.
Okay.
In the same area as where you'd call Enugu today, southeastern Nigeria.
Was backed by the UK, the USA, sort of, the USSR and Israel, whereas Biafra was backed by the People's Republic of China, France, and also Israel. And given that both sides were such a confusing mess, this raises an obvious question. What on earth happened? Why did the Nigerian Civil War have such weird sides? So, like many conflicts in Africa during the Cold War, the roots of the Nigerian Civil War can be traced back to the end of colonial rule there. Nigeria gained its independence from Britain in 1963, and it was a very diverse country made up of many different peoples, whom Britain clumped together because it made the map look nicer. In the north, the largest region in the country, the House of Fulani people were dominant, and they were the ones who made up the majority of Nigeria's military and were predominantly Muslim. The Yoruba were the largest group in the southwest, and they were the wealthiest, and their region housed Nigeria's current capital. And the southeast was mostly made up of the Igbo people, whose land was home to much of Nigeria's massive oil reserves. Long story short, after Britain left, the three groups couldn't decide on where the capital would stay, how much autonomy everyone would get, and who would be allowed into the army. In 1966, there was a military coup, shortly followed by a counter-coup, and honestly, a lot of people were purged. Ethnic violence exploded, and hundreds of thousands of Igbo people fled to the southeast, and leaders there opted to break away in 1967. The Nigerian leadership didn't accept this, and so, civil war. So why were the supporters of each...
Okay, we can kill it there,
Yeah.
but you can even see why there's a migration of Igbo people, why we're even dealing with the Igbo culture down there in southeast Nigeria. So like history does play a big part. Like today we're having fights with foreigners in South Africa, and we can relate, right? So here you have these British and American forces opposing Chinese and and Russian forces. Again, another story of let me stop my sharing my screen actually so you can see me. And you have another proxy situation, a proxy war situation where it's the global East versus the global West. And those are really the two main voices that are coming through. And some purport that they have certain ideas of liberty and freedom, and it's all a mess. It's like many narratives running at the same time. History is a nice drama. If you like fiction, like history's full of like things that will blow your mind. But it's the same thing you're seeing in South Africa today. And this is why I try not to judge these African countries. I've always struggled to reconcile and just chalk up the idea that, okay, it's just because they are more corrupt. Again, those mainstream narratives that if you don't take care of, you'll believe that, oh, they are corrupt, they are less evolved. We must be smarter as South Africans. That's why our country is still together, right? And we don't realize that we could be on the same path that these people are headed. Did we not see July unrest a couple of years ago, where because we jailed the president, that the whole people started burning shops and factories and ports, right? That's not shy away from a bombing campaign. And in South African politics today, we've always spoke about this communist side that's really influenced, maybe even funded by Russia and then there's the side that's more aligned. In fact, some people today in the ANC will kind of blame Cyril, saying that he's interesting to be aligned with more white people and more the West. So it's like, but there's all these misconceptions. Again, this reductionist approach to having conversations about history, and then it becomes a mess, and then we fight, and then we blow stuff up, and then or MK rises, joins with the EFF. They decide that actually screw democracy. They don't understand the value of democracy and what it protects us from. They take up arms, much like the ANC took up arms with the MK wing, which is surprisingly now a different party.
Yes.
They took up arms to take over the government. So the ANC also, MK today with EFF decided to take up arms, train people, and go to the capital cities and take the president out of the presidency on purpose. All of a sudden, people lose value in the rand. People sell all of their rand holdings. The currency collapses. We start hyperinflating to pay for stuff because we can't afford it. So we start printing more South African rands, and we're just like another African country. It's like a very couple of steps that could take us there, and we've already seen ingredients of that happening simply because people just are not aware and educated of what's really at play. People think that a lot of human struggle is human based, like it's a human versus human thing. People think that humans are the problem. Zulus are the problem. Boers are the problem. Bedis are the problem. Nigerians are the problem. Whoever's the problem. And because I don't think we're all, as a collective, developed to the point where we understand even our history books, right? Like the discovery of things like penicillin and antibiotics in history will be like 2 paragraphs in your history book. And the rest will be about wars and people and this and Hitler and World War II. But the consequences of those discoveries had a bigger impact on our lives than any of these political events. The fact that you have a fridge has a bigger impact than any of these political events. The fact that you can preserve food and freeze it is a bigger determinant of your quality of life than whatever a politician might say. But because technology and history, technology and engineering is so difficult to understand for the unlearned person, we don't understand really the significance of these events and what really played a role in history, right? Like somebody figured out how to fly, and that changed how we trade goods all over the world. Somebody discovered steel. All of a sudden, we have trains. All of a sudden, we have pistol engines. And all of a sudden, we can move food from one place to another before it rots. That had a bigger consequence on where we ended up as humanity than any.
Yeah.
Now we can host a podcast. You're 400 kilometers away from me. We're having instant communication with each other and sharing ideas. And we're connecting to a network. We were just on the internet, played a video that's probably hosted on a server in India. And then we're going to upload this. If we had millions of followers, that was going to get to a network of portable screens, portable TVs in everybody's pocket.
Yeah.
Right? And that would influence so many. It's like that has so many consequences, the ability to do this. Our podcast might not be reaching a lot of people now, but there are other podcasts where we are getting information, like the video we just watched, that does have that kind of consequence, that does inspire the next person to invent the next thing and move humanity forward. Politicians are just kind of in the way, but if you're not educated, you will, one, get overwhelmed by politics, and two, give them more power than they actually have.
Yeah.
That's really, I guess that's some of the ways I relate to the Nigerian story. That's some of the way my history makes me think about it. And I guess that's just also an example of how just the fact of where the book takes place, the setting of the book, that can be a 4-hour conversation if you want.
Yeah.
Just the fact that it's in Enugu. And you can imagine it's a 300-page book. So how many more things can you go into? We didn't really go into religion and the church and how it established itself in Africa and the relation to things fall apart. That could be another podcast. I always feel like we will never fully get through the essence of a book just by one conversation. And this is why one day I'd like us to visit it back. And I would like to thank you for letting me have that little bit of rant, because I think it proves the point that there's a lot to take from this book. And the only way to really at least start to amount some sort of value is to pick up the book yourself and read it.
Of course, always. And I love your rants, man. I'm always learning something. I'm not really a history buff, so it's not instinctual for me to think, actually, let me look up some more about what's behind this. Unfortunately, at the moment, a face value person, but I'm learning that, it helps to dig a little deeper.
It does. Look, it's not for everyone. This is kind of obsessive, right? It's just kind of like obsessive, but I'm glad that you are gaining value from it, and that's really all you need to do is to be able to. I mean, how many people are sitting on a Sunday night right now having a long conversation about history and civil war and military coups? This is the beginning. Well, this is part of that process of just being a little more informed when you see and when you read your next book, you get a little more curious just because you know a little bit more, So I appreciate the insights that you shared with me, certainly some of the personal anecdotes. And I think your strength is really the fact that, one, you got through the whole book, right? And that you're a better reader than I am. Like, as much as you might think I'm a history buff, I was not really a fiction person. But there's so much that I'm missing. And then I struggle to read. You might be surprised. I actually have to listen to audiobooks and then have my tags with me and be tagging important parts.
It depends on the book. A really good fiction book, I will read it quickly and I will remember it like it's a movie. It's one of the reasons I enjoy mangas and comic books as well, is because it plays in my head and then I'll sit on my screen like, what was I watching? Oh, it wasn't a show.
That's a superpower to me. Like, I struggle through books. That's a superpower. So that's what I'd like to learn more. And I think being in part of this book club, being with you guys, having like inspired me. I wouldn't have picked up this book if it wasn't for y'all. But it's like taking me on a whole new journey. I should have listened actually to all the people that try to tell me. Read fiction. Any final
Silent
thoughts?
Patient,
Yeah.
slow burner, try it out.
I mean, yeah. I think. Do you feel like you have a lot more to say? Do you think we should go into final thoughts? I gave mine.
I
That rant
think-
was it.
Yeah, my final thoughts are that you have to pick this up. Doesn't matter who you think you are, who you think you're not. Please pick this book up. It is amazing. You might even learn something about yourself from it. Best ending ever. Just you don't see it coming. I love endings you don't see coming.
Yeah.
Like at no point was I thinking, oh yeah, totally no. So please check it out.
Truly fantastic book, guys. That's been us. This has been Abby's Book Club. You've been listening to Impressions, and this was a recording of Chimamanda Ngozi's Purple Hibiscus. And we out.
Woo!